Washington, at the Pentagon, President George Bush, with General Myers, his Chief of Staff, and Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, and his wife there beside him, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for our
they will be going
invocation,
to the Pentagon and remembering the moment when American Airlines Flight 77
Almighty God, we ask you to bless
hurtled into the side wall of the Pentagon, killing 125 people inside the Pentagon, 64 people outside.
We ask you now to bless the memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice a year ago. Bless those who suffered injury and are still recovering. Bless all of those who aided in the rescue and recovery. Bless all the affected families and friends who struggle with the loss and pain. Our tribute to all of them, O Lord, is our steadfast resolve. We are amazed and grateful for the immense accomplishment of reconstruction. The rebuilding of the Pentagon is more than the restoration of stone and steel. It represents the spirit of America. Lord, it represents our nation standing together, restored and renewed by your life-giving love and hope. Today, Lord, we rise as a people to meet the challenges of a new day. Fortify our inner courage as we hold the moral high ground. Deepen our resolve to stand against evil no matter the cost. And grant us, Lord, wisdom to continue building on the foundation of equality, justice, and liberty. Now, Lord, we offer this sacred ground to you and ask your blessing upon it. We will not let those who died fade from our memories. We will not be swayed from our faithful service in the cause of freedom. With your blessing, Lord, we consecrate this building, all who serve here, all the men and women of our armed forces who serve around the world. Guide us as we press on in the cause of justice and peace for our country and for the world. God bless America. Amen.
Please be seated.
And now the U.S. Army Band and their soloist, Chief Petty Officer Tracy Thomas of the U.S. Coast Guard Band are going to play Last Full Measure of Devotion.
Grateful nation bows its head in sorrow, and in thanks for guaranteeing our tomorrow. The last full measure of devotion, that's what they gave to the cause. The last full measure of devotion, and though they cannot hear our applause, we honor them forever and keep alive their story, pay tribute to their lives and give them all the glory. The last
last full measure of devotion. And in 15 seconds' time, a moment of silence, the moment when the American Airlines flight hit the wall of the Pentagon, which will be followed by the unfurling of the United States flag and the national anthem.
President Bush, escorted by Secretary Rumsfeld, will move to the side stage for the unfurling of the American flag and our national anthem. Please stand.
The flag flutters over this part of the Pentagon that was rebuilt in record time. The people doing the work there said, we think we can finish it before the first anniversary, and in fact finished with 3 months in hand. And people who've been there say you simply can't tell the difference between the old and the new, except for one stone that commemorates the moment when the building was attacked.
Join with us for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by children representing the following schools: Bertie Backus Middle School, Ketchum Elementary School, Lecky Elementary School, University Park Elementary School.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The 4 schools mentioned were schools attended by children who died on Flight 77. And now the ceremonial here continues by addresses, first of all from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a powerful figure, highest ranking military office in the United States, General Richard Myers. After him, the
Please
Secretary
be
of
seated.
Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, and then President George W. Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Myers.
President and Mrs. Bush,
Secretary and Mrs. Rumsfeld, distinguished guests, families and friends of those we lost a year ago today. Until last year in this country, the day September 11th was significant, but only to a few hardcore historians. On this day in 1777, American forces fought under the new national flag, the Stars and Stripes, for the first time at the Battle of Brandywine in Pennsylvania. On September 11th in 1814, American naval forces won an important victory on Lake Champlain in upstate New York. And ironically, on this day in 1941, workmen began the construction on this building, the Pentagon. All of us wish September 11th had remained an obscure historical footnote. But instead, a few murderous fanatics immortalized this day forever by striking at the symbols of our military and economic power both here and in New York. The horrific loss of life gripped us with sadness and with anger and a new awareness about hatred in this world. The terrorists sought to instill fear. Instead, our nation responded with resolve. Singular acts of courage were repeated 1,000 times. Police, firefighters, medical personnel, and passing citizens rushed to this building just as they did to the World Trade Center and to that pasture in western Pennsylvania. No matter who they were, all shared a common purpose. How can I help? In this crowd are so many Americans who've done just that. I see the rescue workers from our local neighborhoods, cities, and counties. You were among the first on scene, and many stayed for months out of compassion for our loss. Thank you. I see others who came from within the Pentagon to help those caught in the fire and devastation. But no matter where you came from or what you did, we'll never forget your acts of courage and your acts of caring. I see those who've worked inside this building, helped defend our nation, and taking the fight to the terrorists. My thanks to you and your families for your sacrifices this past year. I see many of those who were injured and survived the attacks. You fought to overcome, of course, your physical injuries, the burns and the broken bones. Let me tell you that your spirit and your tenacity is an inspiration to us all. I also see the hard hat patriots of the Phoenix Project. You've restored this great building ahead of schedule with muscle, determination, marble, cement, and Indiana limestone. You did more than repair our windows and walls. You repaired our souls. In the process, you turned this building into another symbol, one of American resilience. Our great thanks for a job well done. I also see out here many others who've lent their support and prayers. Some have no personal connection with this building, but one. Your country was attacked. Thank you for caring. Sadly, though, as I look around, what I don't see are the friends who died here a year ago. But so many of their families are here to represent them, bringing their own strength and their own courage. You are the living memorials we look to, and we will always embrace you in our Pentagon family. We shall keep you and your lost loved ones in our hearts forever. Their lives will inspire us to a greater potential than we ever thought possible. The British statesman Edmund Burke once suggested, all that is needed for evil to prosper is for a few good men to do nothing. I guarantee you that will not happen because Americans, by the millions, will act. We witnessed such action over Pennsylvania. Once Americans on United Flight 93 discovered the terrorist plans, they took action. For the sake of others they'd never even met, they stopped evil. Today, you and I enjoy our beloved freedoms because of the sacrifices made by many before us, from our nation and from our friends and allies around the world. Now it's our turn to bear the burden for our children, for our grandchildren, for our fallen comrades, for America, and for the world. September 11th is unfortunately a day that will now always be remembered. But I think we're a nation that refuses to dwell on our past sorrows. We rebuild, we move on to the promise of tomorrow. And just like at the Battle of Brandywine, our flag will fly free. And just like at Lake Champlain, we will be victorious. As we go forward, let us remember that this struggle is about the liberties that we hold and that are held by freedom-loving people around the world that we hold dear. It's our freedom that makes us great. We must not and we will not fail to safeguard this precious gift. May God bless you and your wonderful families, and may God continue to bless America.
General Richard Myers, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he's going to be followed by the Secretary of Defense and then by the President of the United States, George W. Bush. But first, an interlude of music, A Hero for Today, performed by the U.S. Army Band, with another soloist, Staff Sergeant Steve Kramer.
They serve this country honorably, a people strong and blessed, never ones to compromise. They strive to be the best. This nation is the land they love, to honor and obey, qualities that make someone a hero for today. And the silent cheering of the crowd somehow tells them that we're proud. And as we bend our knees to pray, may we find a way to say thanks to a hero for today. When you stand for freedom, you sometimes stand alone, defending our America on shores so far from home. Courageous moments set in time, and a flag that points the way on this lifelong journey of a hero for today. And the silent cheering of the crowd somehow tells them that we're proud. And as we bend our knees to pray, may we find a way to say thanks to a hero, thanks to a hero. And the silent cheering of the crowd somehow tells them that we're proud. And as we bend our knees to pray, may we find a way to say thanks to a hero for today. And as we bend our knees to pray, may we find a way to say thanks to a hero, a freedom-loving hero. Thanks to a hero for today.
Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, will speak next here at the Pentagon. was ordered by the Secret Service to leave immediately after
Ladies and
the
gentlemen, Secretary
plane was
Rumsfeld.
crashed in, but actually stayed behind and pulled several people to safety from the crash site before he was taken away by the security services.
President Bush, Mrs. Bush, members of Congress and the Cabinet, distinguished foreign guests, family members, General Myers, and the Pentagon family, welcome. We're here today to honor those who died in this place and to rededicate ourselves to the cause for which they gave their lives, the cause of human liberty. In a sense, we meet on a battlefield. If it does not appear so today, that is because of the singular devotion of the men and women who work day and night to fulfill a solemn vow that not one stone of this building would be out of place on this anniversary. We thank you for your dedication and your accomplishment. But 1 year ago, this was a battle zone, a scene of billowing smoke, towering flames, broken rock, and twisted metal. It says much about our nation and the fierceness and resilience of the American people that were we not here now in this solemn ceremony, a visitor passing would see no hint of the terrible events that took place here but 1 year ago today. But we must not forget what happened here. Dedicated men and women came here on a clear September morning to serve their country, and then, in an instant, were taken from us. We gather today to remember them, but we're here for another purpose as well, to mark that first anniversary of a day that will be remembered by history and commemorated by successive generations, so long as we remain free people. For a battle was joined on that day, a battle still unfolding between a nation of free people and forces that seek to plunge that nation, and indeed the free world, into the darkness of tyranny and terror. We assemble today to ask what has been accomplished in the name of those who died and on behalf of those who live. 1 month after the attacks, our Commander-in-Chief came here to the Pentagon to speak to us, to console us, and to encourage us for the struggle still ahead. Of the terrorists, Mr. President, you said they dwell in dark corners. With patience, the terrorists will be pursued. They will be isolated, surrounded, until there's no place to run, to hide, or to rest. Well, to the men and women of the armed forces, this you are doing. In Afghanistan, you have rescued a country and liberated a people. You've rooted the terrorists out of the caves and the shadows. You are performing heroically. Know that the American people value what you do for our country. In this past year, some of your comrades have given their lives in the defense of freedom, and we remember each of them today. And to their families, we offer our sympathy and thank you for the love of country that you instilled in each of those extraordinary human beings. And we remember in our prayers each of the Allied soldiers who have fallen on the field of battle. From the first moments of this struggle, America knew she was not alone. Support came from every corner of the world. Mr. President, the coalition you have assembled is truly remarkable. Some 90 nations, literally half of the world, have joined in this effort, the greatest military coalition ever assembled in human history. Many coalition partners are here today, and we say to you, thank you for standing with us. And please extend our gratitude to your fellow citizens. Tell them how much we value their friendship and their steadfastness. In the past year, we've been awakened to our vulnerabilities, made conscious of the dangers we face in this new century. That awakening came at a terrible price, but the terrorists aspire to even greater destruction. unless they are stopped, the light of history will fade from this day, turning its gaze instead to subsequent days, when not thousands, but tens of thousands of lives could be lost. The road ahead is long, but while we have not yet achieved victory, we know in one important sense that the terrorists who attacked us have already been defeated. They were defeated before the first shot was fired in Afghanistan. They were defeated because they failed utterly to achieve their objectives. The terrorists wanted September 11th to be a day when innocents died. Instead, it was a day when heroes were born. The terrorists wanted September 11th to be a day when hatred reigned. Instead, it was a day when we witnessed love beyond measure. We saw it in the rescue workers who rushed into burning buildings to save lives, knowing they might never emerge. We saw it in the passengers on Flight 93, who learned what was happening and decided it was better to fight and die in a grassy Pennsylvania field than allow the terrorists to reach our nation's capital. And we've seen it every day since, in the service of those who have risked their lives and given their lives to stop terrorism. The terrorists wanted September 11th to be a day when free people learned fear and self-doubt. Instead, it was a day when a sleeping patriotism was awakened in this country. Even as they wiped away their tears, Americans unfurled their flags. They flew them from seemingly every house and car, in schools and parks and playing fields. And in town squares all across the nation, citizens gathered to light candles and to pray. The fruits of September 11th were not hatred, fear, or self-doubt, as the terrorists intended. They were charity and courage, patience and perseverance. We have cause for hope because we have seen evil reveal itself in our midst and then watch it humbled by the power of simple goodness. From the construction workers who rebuilt this wounded building stone by stone, to those wounded here who have inspired our nation with their courageous struggle to recover, to the thousands of school children who sent pictures to comfort us and to lift our spirits, and they did lift our spirits. The American people responded in ways that stir the soul. Many Americans ask, what can we do to help? The answer is you have helped. You've prayed, you've volunteered, you've given your sons and daughters to defend our freedom. We will win this war on terror. We will win no matter how long or hard or difficult or costly it is. One day, our grandchildren will look back on this time and ask, how was the war on terror won? And we will tell them about the brave men and women who gave their lives so that we could live in freedom. We remember them today, and to their families, many of whom are here, know that we have not forgotten, but let us do more than remember. The greatest honor we can bestow on them, the best memorial we can fashion for them, is to protect our liberty and secure it for generations to come. That is our charge. That is our responsibility. May God bless our nation in the struggle ahead.
As Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of State for Defense, finishes his speech, it's perhaps worth just remembering that here in New York City, events were still unfolding a year ago. Just 2 minutes ago, 12 months ago, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in those terrifying scenes that killed so many. Meantime, at the Pentagon, the U.S. Army Band, and this time soloist Petty Officer Reed Williams, plays United Through It All, and after that, the address by the President of the United States, George W. Bush.
Lady Liberty's darkest day, terror rose against our land, evil had its way. We watched those two strong towers come crashing to the ground. Innocent lives were sacrificed in rubble on the ground. We stood in awe, in disbelief, at though the thousands fell. In the midst of all this horror, in the midst of all this hell, we bound our spirits in resolve to answer freedom's call. This is America, we'll rise above it all. United in our victory, united in our cause. We are Americans, united as we all. We're united in our victory, united in our cause. We are Americans, united is all. We'll fight up our wounded, grieve for those who died, praise our heroes' efforts, and sing out with pride. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood. For we're united in our victory, united in our cause. We stand against all enemies. Liberty has no walls. We're stronger than those towers. This country will not fall. We are Americans, united.
And now, at 4 minutes past 10 Eastern Standard Time, we're just 2 minutes away from the moment when the fourth plane crashed and is being remembered in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the plane where the passengers took a vote and decided to attack the hijackers, and as a result the plane crashed into a field, killing everybody on board. But now the President of the United States, George W. Bush.
One year ago, men and women and children were killed here because they were Americans. And because this place is a symbol to the world of our country's might and resolve. Today we remember each life. We rededicate this proud symbol, and we renew our commitment to win the war that began here. The terrorists chose this target hoping to demoralize our country. They failed. Within minutes, brave men and women were rescuing their comrades. Within hours, in this building, the planning began for a military response. Within weeks, commands went forth from this place that would clear terrorist camps and caves and liberate a nation, and within 1 year, this great building has been made whole once again. Many civilian and military personnel have now returned to offices they occupied before the attack. Pentagon is a working building, not a memorial. Yet the memories of a great tragedy linger here. And for all who knew loss here, life is not the same. the 184 whose lives were taken in this place. Veterans and recruits, soldiers and civilians, husbands and wives, parents and children, left behind family and friends whose loss cannot be weighed. The murder of innocents cannot be explained, only endured. And though they died in tragedy, they did not die in vain. Their loss has moved a nation to action in a cause to defend other innocent lives across the world. This war is waged on many fronts. We've captured more than 2,000 terrorists. A larger number of killers have met their end in combat. We've seized millions in terrorist assets. We're reorganizing the federal government to protect the homeland. Yet there's a great deal left to do. And the greatest tasks and the greatest dangers will fall to the armed forces of the United States. I came to the presidency with respect for all who wear America's uniform every day. Every day, as your commander-in-chief, my respect and that of our nation has deepened. I have great confidence in every man and woman who wears the uniform of the United States of America. I am proud of all who have fought on my orders. And this nation honors all who died in our cause. Wherever our military is sent in the world, you bring hope and justice and promise of a better day. You are worthy of the traditions you represent, the uniform you wear, the ideals you serve. America is counting on you, and our confidence is well placed. What happened to our nation on a September day set in motion the first great struggle of a new century. The enemies who struck us are determined, and they're resourceful. They will not be stopped by a sense of decency or a hint of conscience, but they will be stopped. A greater force is amassed against them. They're opposed by freedom-loving people in many lands. They're opposed by our allies who have fought bravely by our side. And as long as terrorists and dictators plot against our lives and our liberty, they will be opposed by the United States Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, and Marines. We fight as Americans have always fought, not just for ourselves, but for the security of our friends and for peace in the world. We fight for the dignity of life against fanatics who feel no shame in murder. We fight to protect the innocent so that the lawless and the merciless will not inherit the earth. At every turn of this war, we will always remember how it began and who fell first. The thousands who went to work, boarded a plane, or reported to their post. Today, the nation pays our respects to them. Here and in Pennsylvania and in New York, we honor each name and each life. We ask God to bring comfort to every home where they are loved and missed. And on this day, and on every day, may He watch over the United States of America. God bless.
The President speaking at the Pentagon. A different kind of speech from that made by his Secretary of Defense. He spoke very much about the battle still unfolding, and the President, perhaps as befits the head of state,
Ladies and gentlemen,
speaking
please
in rather
stand
more
for the
general
benediction
language.
delivered by Rear Admiral
And
Black.
the service goes on there at the Pentagon or outside the Pentagon with a benediction and the singing of God Bless America. And meantime, in clouds of dust now, as the wind blows up here on the southern tip of Manhattan, Ground Zero, the site of the World Trade Center. The names are still being read.
Edward Joseph Mardovich.
Charles Joseph Maggiata.
Louis Mariani.
Kenneth Joseph Marino.
Lester V. Marino.
Peter Marino.
Kevin Marlowe.
Jose Miranda.
John Marshall.
James Martello.
Michael A. Marty.
William J. Martin Jr.
Karen
The names
M.
of all
Martin.
2,801
Martin.
victims
Brian
of
P.
the
Martino.
11th of September
Victor
are still being read here in New York.
Pastrana.
Betsy Martinez.
Clusters of
Edward
people,
Martinez.
Jose Angel Martinez.
some of them leaving
Jr.
flowers, some
Robert
leaving photographs of their
Gabriel
families. People from
D. Martinez
80 different
Calderon.
nations
Paul
who were
Richard
killed here.
Martino.
Joseph A.
67
McCauley.
of them British citizens who've been remembered at St. Paul's Cathedral.
Stephen Frank Mossy.
Nicholas George Massa.
Patricia Ann Massari.
Michael Massaroli.
There is something very
Philip William Mastrandria
moving about the
Jr.
simplicity
Rudolph Mastrocinque.
with which
Joseph
the dreadful
Mathai.
day of 9/11 is
Charles
being remembered
Mathers.
William A. Matheson.
here in New
Marcelo
York.
Patriciano.
Margaret
There's been no
Elaine
coercion,
Mattis.
there's been nothing
Robert D.
designed
Maxson.
to pull on the
Walter
heartstrings. They've just
Machuza.
Charles
said to people
J.
who were involved
Morrow.
and to those who weren't, if you want to
Dorothy
come and take
Morrow.
part, do, but feel
Charles
no obligation.
A.
We're not
Morrow
trying to
Jr.
Nancy
impose
P. Morrow.
a way
Tyrone
of remembering
May.
the dead on you. It's up to you.
Troy
But as you can see,
Marcellus Maynard.
thousands of people
Robert
have come
J.
here,
Mayo.
mainly the families of the
Kathy
bereaved,
Nancy Mazza.
to commemorate
Edward
the moment.
Mazzella Jr.
Jennifer Lynn Mazzota.
Caria Mbaya.
James Joseph McAlery.
Brian McAleese.
Patricia Ann McEnany.
Colin Robert MacArthur.
John Kevin McAvoy.
Kenneth M. McBrayer.
Brendan McCabe.
Michael McCabe,
Thomas McCann.
Justin McCarthy,
Kevin M. McCarthy.
Michael McCarthy,
Robert McCarthy.
Stanley McCaskill,
Katie Marie McCloskey.
Joan McConnell Cullinan.
Juliana McCourt.
Ruth Magdalene McCourt.
Charles Austin McCran.
Tanyel F. McDay.
Matthew T. McDermott.
Joseph P. McDonald.
Brian Grady McDonald.
Michael P. McDonald.
John McDowell Jr.
Eamon J. McEnany.
John Thomas McErling.
Daniel Francis McGinley.
Mark Ryan McGinley.
William E. McGinn.
Thomas Henry McGinnis.
Michael Gregory McGinty.
Ann McGovern.
Scott Martin McGovern.
William McGovern. Stacy Dennis McGowan. Francis Noel McGinn. Thomas F. McGinnis, Jr. Patrick Mark McGuire. Thomas M. McHale. Keith McHeffy. Dennis J. McHugh III. Ann M. McHugh. Dennis McHugh. Michael E. McHugh. Robert G. Nickelbane. Donald James McIntyre. Stephanie Marie McKenna. Barry J. McKeon. Evelyn C. McKinney. Darrell Leron McKinney. George Patrick McLaughlin, Jr. Robert C. McLaughlin, Jr. Gavin McMahon. Robert D. McMahon. Edmund McNally.
Now, as the reading of the names goes on, I'm joined by James Rubin, a former Assistant Secretary of the State Department and a close watcher of the political side of what's going on here in the United States. You heard both Donald Rumsfeld and the President speak at the Pentagon. What did you make of what they said? What interpretation do you put on the message they're trying to give the United States and the rest of the world, indeed, today?
Well, I think there are really two messages. The first and probably most important message is a message of remembrance and memorial, and they spoke very eloquently about the lives lost and the meaning that those lost lives are to the families. I think secondly, certainly Donald Rumsfeld and to a lesser extent the President were setting up a discussion about what comes next. There was a lot of the future tense used in these descriptions. This wasn't a policy speech, it wasn't a policy message, but it clearly wasn't a sense that this year that has gone by is the end of the war on terrorism. Even though the Taliban is gone, even though most of Al-Qaeda is scattered, it was very much about what's coming forward. And Donald Rumsfeld, I think, even to my surprise, made an elliptical reference to Iraq when he said that we lost thousands today, and in the future we face the prospect of losing tens of thousands. And that is a very direct reference to what he's argued in the last couple of weeks, that if Iraq is left undealt with, that we face the prospect of weapons of mass destruction killing tens of thousands of Americans. The fact that he used those same terms suggested to me that he dropped a reference to Iraq in the discussion.
Many people see a distinction between the events that happened here on 9/11 and the proposed attack or change of regime in Iraq. They see them as two different aspects. Is the administration increasingly presenting them as part of the same thing?
Well, I think, first of all, personally, I agree with you. I don't believe that there is evidence to this date that suggests that Saddam Hussein was behind the attacks that occurred right here. I think the administration is conflicted on this. There have been some top administration officials who've tried to hint at a link between the Al-Qaeda organization and Saddam Hussein, but they've never put that fully forward for one good reason. The evidence just isn't there yet. There is some evidence, but it's unproven. So instead what they've done is raise the question of what this attack a year ago on this spot showed us about the dangers of the modern world. When determined men are going to try to kill American citizens, how dangerous the world can be. And so their link is not a direct link, it's a link about the security of the United States in a dangerous world.
What do you make of the response of people in this city and in the United States to the actions that the American administration have taken as a result of 9/11?
Well, I think there are two levels. First of all, I think most Americans, myself included, believe that the early steps by the Bush administration in September and October and November were performed highly competently. A coalition was built, an argument was made, a commitment was made to help rebuild Afghanistan so it could never again be a place where terrorists could operate from. And I think those steps were taken very well. At that time, there was support for even taking further action in the American public against Iraq, against other places. I think that's eroded to some extent. And although Americans are not as concerned about the views of the rest of the world as your viewers and listeners probably are, I think they are concerned that we might go forward with this Iraq operation without support from the rest of the world. The polls suggest that without some multilateral support, most Americans, more than 50%, have doubts about going after Iraq.
Well, of course, George Bush will be speaking at the General Assembly of the United Nations
tomorrow,
here in New York tomorrow, and indeed he's going to be up here later on today to make a speech on Ellis Island, which is going to be broadcast nationwide, so we'll get a better indication from that and from what he says at the General Assembly what the ongoing policy is. James Rubin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And at Ground Zero, the names are still being read. And in a moment, the bugle call taps is going to be sounded just before 10:30 New York time, which is the time that the North Tower fell. And in a sense, that was the concluding event of the horrors that were visited on the United States on the 11th of September, when the North Tower fell. By then, the Pentagon had been attacked and the other plane had crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Nancy Morgenstern.
Richard Morgan.
Lionel Geronimo Maracho.
Sana F. Maury.
Dennis Gerard Maroney.
Blanca Bedina Morocho.
Well, I'm joined here now by a British citizen who's come over here to be part of this, Tom Clark, who leads the UK Family Support Group. Your sister Soraya was killed here a year ago.
She was.
Did you know anything about that at the time? Were you able to speak to her? Many people did speak to members of their families inside the tower.
Many people I've spoken to in the group in the UK of victims did hear from their relatives either via email or received a phone call. That, in our case, didn't happen. I was watching the attacks on television at work and saw it happening live, like so many other people did. And but we heard no word from her. It would have perhaps been nice things to do, but I like to think that she was a very capable person and was probably doing something else at the time, rather than trying to make phone calls.
But you knew she'd be in the tower, did you? Or you thought
that wasn't certain at first. It was still very early in the morning. I knew she started work early, but it wasn't until a day or two later that we actually found out she was at work. I tracked down some emails to colleagues that she sent minutes before the planes hit, and she'd been in since about just before 8 that morning.
A moment ago you were here. I'd just like our viewers to see this, reading the names, joining Robert De Niro, I think, of the podium.
Yes, yes.
Gene Collins. John Michael Collins. Michael L. Collins.
Thomas J. Collins.
Joseph Collison.
Jeffrey Dwayne Coleman.
Patricia Malia Kaladner.
Linda M. Colon.
Saul E. Colon.
Tom, you've been involved in this family support group, indeed were part of the setting up of it. What have you been able to do or been trying to do for the 67 British victims?
What we recognised when we first started getting in touch with other victims was that just because of the geographical distance between here and the UK, there was a vacuum of information. There was a lot coming out through the media here, not many official announcements that were coming to us through official channels, and we just needed to share information, and that's largely why we got together. And very rapidly, people began to join. We now represent 57 of the victims. There's hundreds of people in the group now, nearly over 200 people, who are largely doing this just to receive information about what happened to their loved ones, what's going on in regard to the criminal investigation, issues of compensation, and also another of the things that we've managed to achieve is to arrange for a memorial service in London, in St Paul's, which is going on as we speak.
I'd like to talk to you a bit more about that in a moment,
yes.
But let's just go back to this reading now down behind us at Ground Zero, because we're coming to the moment when taps is going to be sounded at 10:28 New York time, the time when the North Tower fell.
Joseph Michael Navas.
Francis Joseph Nazario.
Glenroy I. Neblet.
Raymond Marcus Neblet. Mom misses you.
Jerome O. Ned.
Lawrence Nedell.
Luke G. Nee.
Pete Negron.
Laura Ann Niera.
Ann M. Nelson.
David William Nelson.
James Nelson.
Michelle Ann Nelson.
Peter Allen Nelson.
Oscar Francis Nesbitt.
Gerard Terrence Nevin.
Renee Lucille Newell.
Christopher Newton Carter.
Kapinga Nagua.
Nancy U.N. Lee.
Jody Nicolo.
Kathleen Ann DeCasco.
Siren sounding on the Hudson River at the moment that the North Tower of the World Trade Center fell, and the bell being rung in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Martin S. Nigera.
Alfonso Joseph Neddymeyer.
Frank John Neistat Jr.
Gloria Nye.
Juan Nieves Jr.
Troy Edward Nilsson.
Paul Nimby.
Sean B. Niven.
Catherine Marie Nowak.
Curtis Terrence Noel. Danielle R. Nolan. Robert Noonan. Jacqueline June Norton. Robert Grant Norton. Daniela Nataro. Brian Christopher Dovanti. Suruchi Damata. Brian Felix Nunez. Jose Nunez. Jeffrey Roger Nusbin. Dennis Oberg. James P. O'Brien Jr. Michael P. O'Brien. Scott J. O'Brien. Timothy Michael O'Brien. Daniel O'Callahan. Diana J. Connor. Dennis James O'Connor Jr. Keith Kevin O'Connor. Richard J. O'Connor. Amy O'Doherty. Marnie Hunt O'Doherty. James Andrew O'Grady. Tom Thomas O. Hagan, Patrick J. O'Keefe, William O'Keefe, Gerald O'Leary, Timothy Mahoney.
So the reading goes on down there on Ground Zero beside us. Tom Clark, as somebody who was bereaved, who lost their sister during this, what effect have these ceremonies had on you? Have they been a way of grieving? Have they made you feel proud about?
Certainly a sense of pride, and the public recognition of the significance of the tragedy, that it was such an awful event. But in terms of personal grief, an event like today, yes, we all are feeling that grief just like we have done every day since September 11th of last year. But because this tragedy happened, it's such a publicly important tragedy, we have to share or go about our grieving in full view of the public. And the readings today are a good illustration of that. I stood up there with Robert De Niro, as you said, and read the names of victims. It's an illustration of how it has been shared with the public the whole time. I think for many people, after these services, after the ceremonies, that's when they have time to reflect on their loved one. And it's important not to forget that we've been remembering what happened that day every day since it happened, and have been reminded of it through the television, through newspapers. There's not a day's gone by when it hasn't been mentioned somewhere.
It must be different and more difficult in a way for you than for, say, we were talking earlier to the widow of a fireman, who on that day, after all, was doing what he'd been trained to do. Your sister was just at work. It could have been anybody's sister.
As I see it, everybody there was doing what they were trained to do, or doing their jobs. And firemen are heroes. They're sort of paid to be heroes. That's their job. And I see upon everybody, these ordinary people. It was a very ordinary, I think that's why it's affected so many people so deeply who weren't directly involved, like my family were. Because it could have been them, it could have been anyone who were going to office doing their job that day. They were all doing their jobs, and they all died doing them, and I think they all deserve to be treated as heroes, essentially.
Tom Clark, thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.
Jeffrey Matthew Palazzo.
Watching a BBC News special on the commemoration ceremonies marking the first anniversary of the September 11th attacks in the United States. I'm Lise Doucette in the Afghan capital Kabul, and you're watching now a special edition of Asia Today. Today's ceremonies in the United States are a poignant reminder that nearly 3,000 people died in the September 11th attacks. But those suicide strikes unleashed an American-led war against terror, which brought the war here to Afghanistan, and a Taliban regime accused of harboring Osama bin Laden and the headquarters of his Al-Qaeda network. Countless Afghans lost their lives in that war, but it brought an end to the Taliban regime, and it brought international support to Afghanistan, pledges of financial, military and political support as a new political order was ushered in. But the task of rebuilding this country after nearly 24 years of war is proving to be slow and daunting. Adam Minot now reports.
It's a painful process coming home when it starts with a measles jab. Every child returning to Afghanistan is inoculated. For some who were born in squalid refugee camps in Pakistan, it's their first visit to their country. A year ago, their families would never have expected to be heading home. They'd fled the Taliban, but after the American bombing campaign, they now feel it's safe to make the journey. And in much larger numbers than expected. More than 1.5 million are back. They register, are given some flour, some money, and basic household goods.
I came from Pakistan because here become peace and our country become relaxed.
Now Afghanistan situation is very good and we like it. For this reason we come.
They return to a devastated land. Here the Shamali plain, blitzed by recent American bombing. Before that, civil war and the invasion by the Soviet Union in 1979. On the northern approaches to the capital, Kabul, This has been a battlefield for the past 2 decades, and it is littered with the detritus of war. Hardly anything is left standing here. Nasser Mohammed found his home completely wrecked. He faces a massive rebuilding task. It's a struggle for the whole family. This is our home, he said. We want to stay here, but if I don't find a job soon, we will have to return to Pakistan. What September the 11th meant to the people of Afghanistan was the chance of an end to 23 years of misery. But that is now threatened by the failure of the international community to deliver on all the promised financial aid. Adam Minot, BBC News, in the Shamali Plain.
Well, the battle to rebuild Afghanistan is complicated by the reality that another war is still being waged against Al-Qaeda here and across the rest of the world. The U.S. State Department says Al-Qaeda cells are still active in 60 countries. It believes 10 to 30,000 operatives are at large with links to militant groups around the world. Since September the 11th, about 1,600 alleged Al-Qaeda members have been detained. So far, only one person in the United States, Zacarias Moussaoui, has been indicted for conspiring with Osama bin Laden and others to attack the United States. The U.S. has frozen $112 million in assets belonging to the organization. But a UN report says Al-Qaeda still has access to considerable resources, controlling between $30 to $300 million. And while Al-Qaeda has been mostly driven from Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden has never been found. So how then is the coalition faring in its continuing war against terror? I put that question to General Dan McNeil, the commander of the American Special Forces here in Afghanistan.
I assure you we were prepared on the 10th of September, and while it is an incredibly difficult proposition for many reasons, the environment, in some respects the people we're trying to help, in some respects people who are helping us, in some respects the environment of the country itself, I think we're out in front of it. The war is not won, but we're certainly winning it.
Do you have any reliable intelligence about whether Osama bin Laden is dead or alive?
I have no compelling evidence that he's alive, and I have no compelling evidence that he's dead. But Osama bin Laden, in my view, should not be the singular focus of the war on terrorism, nor should any one personality. Personalities taken at a group, I think that's fair, that we should try to tackle as many of them as we can. But most members of the coalition in their intelligence apparatus say that there were arguably thousands, maybe even in the neighborhood of tens of thousands, trained in Afghanistan while the apparatus was functional and while it was not under attack itself and while it had great support from the despotic regime that was running Afghanistan at the time.
But will Operation Enduring Freedom be over until Osama bin Laden is found dead or alive?
I think Osama bin Laden will certainly be helpful to finding an end to the war in terrorism, but he will not be the only factor that says the war is over. And the truth is, you could argue, and I do, that this war has been going on for many years. Perhaps it goes as far back as 1983, and my guess is it'll go on for years more.
But they're beating you on their terrain. They know the terrain better. They're outsmarting you time and time again.
I don't agree.
Bad intelligence, bad allies, bad targets.
I don't agree.
What have you achieved since the start?
I'll offer you this. Perhaps for a military force, and I'm using a rather significant stretch of the term military force to assign that to Al-Qaeda or some organization that might support Al-Qaeda. I think the best thing you can have when you're operating is freedom of maneuver. I can tell you that the coalition has it anywhere they want to have it in Afghanistan. That's not the case for the enemy we oppose.
But is it all unraveling? Less than a year after it started, we've seen an attempted assassination of the president, and there's still fighting in eastern provinces.
No, there is more of this country that is stable and secure than there is that's unstable and insecure, and I believe it improves every day. I don't dispute that in some areas there are difficulties, and we operate to that end, and we don't disguise the fact. The eastern provinces are particularly difficult. Got it. We're there in good numbers. We're going to stay there in good numbers, and we're going to do our best to make it more stable and more secure.
And that was General Dan McNeill, who heads the American Special Forces here in Afghanistan. Well, since September 11th, across the Muslim world, there have been pleas for understanding. Many Muslims have condemned the violence of September the 11th, but they've also asked the world to try to understand why it may have happened. Hamid Gul is one voice among many. He headed Pakistan's military intelligence at a time when it was working with American forces to help the Afghan Mujahideen and Arab fighters battling against the Soviet-backed forces here. When I spoke to him in Islamabad, I asked him for his assessment of America's response to September the 11th.
Well, that's what the Americans are saying, that it might, because what has been done to rectify the frayed sentiment, or to assuage the angered sentiments of the people? What has been done so far? Nothing. The freedom struggle is going on, and the United Nations doesn't listen to them. United Nations is an irrelevant body. There is no international platform where these people can go and dump their fears and their grievances. So what do you do about it?
So unless there's a dramatic change in world politics, a dramatic change in the relations between the Muslim and non-Muslim world?
No, there is only one change which is required. That is change of heart on part of American leadership. That's all. I don't think the European community per se is railing against the world of Islam. No, not at all. I don't think the people are with them. I think that democracies are failing in the West, because democracies are not reflecting in their policy the true sentiments of the people. And these are not the true sentiments of the American people. These are not true sentiments of the UK people. What Tony Blair, for instance, has been doing, the way he has been acting and behaving in this entire picture, I think it is not what the people of UK want. So I think this is a failure of the democracies in the West.
George Bush said, you're either for us or against us. Pakistan's President General Musharraf said, we're for you. Are you also on that side?
Well, we say yes, we are. First of all, we have to be with ourselves, because that is the lesson which was the West taught us, that you have to act in your own self-interest. We have to watch our own interest.
Which is?
And which is the interest of Pakistan.
So is it in the interest of Pakistan to fight against these militant groups?
Yes, we have to fight that. That is our problem. That's the problem of Muslim societies. If it grows out of hand, first of all, it is our problem. It is nobody else's problem. So we have got to find sectarian violence, we have got to do, but our problem, because unfortunately at this time, it is the Muslim lands which are in occupation, the Muslim people who are enslaved in many parts of the world, whereas the Christians have been mostly freed. The Muslims are still under occupation of one or the other power. Now, this is an issue which has to be resolved. It must be resolved politically, diplomatically, and at a proper international forum.
What for you is the greatest tragedy of September the 11th?
There have been greater tragedies than this in terms of human miseries, killings, etc. But the aftermath of this, because it happened inside America, which is led by an immature leadership, and which is now going around, they've become absolutely mad and insane in trying to deal with the situation. And that is really the bigger tragedy than the one on the 11th of September. We must all beg them, we must plead to them, we must ask them, please do not follow this path of disaster. It's not good for them.
A warning from Hamid Gul, the former head of Pakistan's military intelligence. And now let's take a look at some of the other day's top story. Police in Indian-administered Kashmir say suspected Islamic militants have killed a state minister and at least 4 other supporters. The Jammu and Kashmir Law Minister Mushtaq Ahmed Lone was attending an election rally in Kupwara district just north of Srinagar. In a separate incident, 7 people were shot dead at a bus stand in the Poonch district in the south of the state. The killings come as Jammu and Kashmir prepares for elections next week. And in Pakistan, police have killed 2 Pakistanis and arrested at least 5 others during a raid on suspected Islamic militants. Security agents had to call in reinforcements when they came under attack during the raid. Police surrounded the building while a gun battle continued for several hours before the gunmen inside surrendered. A young child was killed in the shootout and 6 policemen were injured. And so violence and threats continue across this region. For another assessment of the stability of this region, we're joined now from Islamabad by the author Ahmed Rashid, the author of a book on the Taliban, who's also an expert on regional politics. Ahmed Rashid, welcome to this special edition of Asia Today. How much of a threat do you think the remembrance of the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda still pose?
Well, I think as far as Afghanistan is concerned, there is a danger that there is in the last few weeks some kind of revival, a reorganization taking place. There's the additional factor of Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, the extremist from the 1980s, who has come back into Afghanistan and is reorganizing with some of the Taliban. But I think, the main blame for this has to lie on the shoulders of the US-led Western Alliance and the failures of the West to give the necessary peacekeeping troops and reconstruction money so that President Hamid Karzai would have something in his hand to be able to extend the writ of his authority.
Well, what is the main obstacle in front of that, Ahmed Rashid? Because Washington has now said it has no objection to the expansion of the International Security Assistance Force. If so, then what's holding it up?
Well, simply given the situation in Afghanistan, it's not good enough for the US to say, well, you Europeans go and provide the troops and give more money. The US will have to play a leading role in this. American experts are saying that US peacekeeping troops have to be used. The US has to give more money. We should remember the US has given something like $300 million this year for reconstruction when it's spending $1 billion a month for the war effort. So I think, the US has to set the example here and match its words with deeds.
And what about the stability of Pakistan? Many members of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are said to have fled across the border. How much of a risk do they pose?
Well, certainly there's been a lot of reorganizing in Pakistan. They have had, the Al-Qaeda has had very close links with Pakistani extremist groups for many, many years. Thousands of them have gone and fought for the Taliban. So the remnants of Al-Qaeda have very good sanctuary here. They have safe houses. They have people, local Pakistanis, to look after them. Many of them have stayed on here after escaping from Afghanistan, and many have left from Pakistan to go to the Middle East and to Africa. So Pakistan has become both a home for some Al-Qaeda elements and a getaway place. So the regime has been trying, I think, very hard to catch these elements, but the kind of safety and security they enjoy in Pakistan with the help of local groups does, of course, pose a major problem.
Ahmed Rashid, thank you very much for joining us live from Islamabad. And now we go to India, where people there are remembering the dead, the people they lost in the September 11th attacks. After the United States and the United Kingdom, India lost the greatest number of lives. Many Indian nationals went to the United States to work for computer companies. They included Anil Umakar, who left his village in central India, hoping for a better life. He was working as a consultant for the firm Cantor Fitzgerald in the World Trade Center when the attacks took place. Our correspondent Satish Jacob went to his village in Nagpur to find out how his family was coping with his death.
Anil Umarkar was on the 103rd floor where he and 4 other Indians worked for a computer firm. They were all killed. His wife Preeti still mourns his death by offering a daily prayer. Adversity has brought their wives even closer.
4 of their wives, we are now the good friends, not only the good friends, but we are the sister for our future. And now, now we are going to become a sister forever, and just we will plan what is good opportunity after this all.
Anil's body was sent home. The coffin from America mystified his neighbors. As Hindus, they cremate their dead, not bury them. The journey Anil Umarkar made was extraordinary. From this remote and tiny village where he grew up, he went to New York. His family naturally had great hopes for him, but those hopes were shattered last year. This is Anil's village, and like everyone else here, Anil's father grows cotton and oranges in a small patch of field.
The villagers are full of admiration for Anil because he was the only one from this village to go abroad. It is very difficult for the village people to make such progress.
Preeti has decided to go back to America, where she hopes to get a job. It was her husband's dream that their daughter should grow up there. Satish Jacob, BBC News, Thadi Pavni, Central India.
And now back here to Afghanistan, which is coping with huge political and security problems. But even so, this country has at least been given a new start. And the mood here in the capital, Kabul, is palpably different. Well, we were hoping for a report from the Afghan capital, Kabul. We seem to be having a technical difficulty. But now we're going to discuss some of the changes that Afghanistan has seen. And we're joined here tonight on Asia Today by Afghanistan's Minister for Communications, Masoom Staniczai. Masoom Staniczai, as you watch the ceremonies today commemorating the September 11th attacks, what goes through your own mind?
Thank you very much first. And I think the Afghan people who are suffering for a long time from what you are calling the terrorist attack in Afghanistan, and Afghan people were this victim, and seeing the tearful eyes of the people coming to this ceremony, and remember me once again of our people, our brothers, sisters, mothers, who every day they lost one of their relatives, and I can feel their pain and their suffering, and I think that human being is the same where it is in Afghanistan or in other part of the world. And it gave us a very big lesson, and the lesson is that the people should live in peace and in peace and cooperation with each other. And that gave us that we should try that how we can improve the humanity and social justice, and that will save us more lives, that will help us to fight together against the act of terrorism in all over the world.
Well, as a minister in Hamid Karzai's government, do you still feel threatened by the remnants of Taliban and Al-Qaeda?
If you think about to remove the Al-Qaeda, as Chairman Karzai very properly stated that at the moment it is destroyed, but the individual packages still exist in different parts of the country. It needs a kind of integration of all the efforts for security, efforts for reconstruction, and I believe more as far as the effort for reconstruction of Afghanistan is accelerated, as far as the humanitarian crisis is improved in this country, and people are helped and people find a job. And as a general, if the poverty is elevated in this country, I think it will strongly contribute to the security, to the peace, and also fight against the terrorism in the country.
So much has to be done. Do you fear the West is not keeping its promises to Afghanistan?
If I say the whole process, what has been done and what has promised, it is a very slow, and this slowness has its own impact on the quick recovery of this country. As far as we can accelerate this process, as far as we can help and what the international community committed, then it will help a lot, and it will save a lot of money, it will save a lot of lives, and the peace and stability in Afghanistan will strongly contribute to this peace and stability in this region. And I should emphasize once again and request the international community not to forget Afghanistan. There are hot spots in other parts of the world. Iraq is coming on the scene, on the media, and then Afghanistan is coming to the back. And I hope that the world should not forget one place and looking to another place where there is more media attention. And I think that has its impact. What is committed to Afghanistan, it should not be diverted to other places of the world where there is the crisis or where is the problem. I think we have to remove the root of the problems in one place completely and then think about the other place. I know that there is linkages. There is a whole problem in this world. Every country needs the peace and stability, but we have to think about Afghanistan, not to forget it.
Masoom Stanagai, Minister of Communications, thank you for joining us here in the Afghan capital, Kabul. I'm Lise Doucette in Kabul. You've been watching a special edition of Asia Today on the day we remember the dead. Goodbye for now.